Good morning, Europe. It's Monday, the 28th of February. We'll be bringing you all the news and analysis on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Here are the latest developments.
Russian forces continue their assault on Ukraine. President Zelensky warns the next 24 hours will be crucial for the future of the country. The EU agrees to deliver arms to Kyiv, as Commission President von der Leyen says Ukraine belongs in the bloc. And a market meltdown in Moscow. Tough new sanctions push the ruble to historic lows.
Ukrainians have spent another night under the threat of airstrikes, taking cover in underground shelters, basements or metro stations. Sirens sounded in the capital, Kiev. Ukraine's President Zelensky has warned the next 24 hours in the capital will be crucial. Ukraine's military said Russian forces continued shelling in all directions on Sunday. Kiev and Moscow are preparing for talks today on the Belarusian border. In earlier developments, President Vladimir Putin moved Russia's nuclear deterrent to special alert in response to what he called NATO aggression. The EU took the unprecedented step of agreeing to send arms to Ukraine. The bloc's also closing its airspace to Russian aircraft and is banning Russian state media outlets. Ukraine says 352 of its civilians have been killed during Russia's invasion. There was no information given as to casualties among its armed forces. Russia has admitted for the first time there are killed and injured soldiers among its troops in Ukraine. The United Nations Security Council has voted to hold a rare emergency special session of the General Assembly later today. The meeting will give all 193 members the opportunity to express their views on the invasion. It's expected to highlight the extent of Russia's isolation.
With a war on European soil, the European Union is in crisis mode, and fronting the EU response is the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who joins me now. Thank you so much for speaking to Euronews.
Thank you for having me.
Is the EU finally ready to stop this war and stand up to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president?
We never wanted this war. Ukraine never wanted this war. It is President Putin, indeed, who started this war and is leading this war. And we are answering with harsh sanctions on the financial and economic field. Today, I have proposed the third package of sanctions, and it's a whole package from financial sanctions, for example, decoupling some Russian banks from SWIFT, to freezing assets of the Russian central bank, listing personalities, but also for the very first time in the European Union, providing military equipment to Ukraine, a country under attack, in conflict. But we are doing two more steps. Today we decided to close our airspace for any Russian aircraft, and we will ban Russia Today and Sputnik because they are the propaganda machine of the Kremlin's war.
And while we're speaking here tonight, they're on the streets outside the Berlaymont calling for also European Union membership. Should Ukraine be given candidacy for EU membership?
We have a process with Ukraine that is, for example, integrating the Ukrainian market into the single market we do have. We have a very close cooperation on the energy grid, for example. So many topics where we work very closely together, and indeed over time they belong to us, they are one of us, and we want them in.
And just finally, have you got any faith in the talks, the peace talks? And will you ever trust Vladimir Putin again?
Of course, it is important that the Ukrainian side agrees to the peace talks and that conditions are fine for the Ukrainian side. In general, it is always better to have peace talks than to have a fight. The trust in President Putin is completely broken and eroded.
Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews.
Thank you for having me.
When President Putin put Russia's nuclear arsenal on alert, the United States did not respond in kind. American Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, called the Russian move unnecessary since the country faces no threat from Ukraine or from any place else. Across America, there were big demonstrations as more people called for Biden administration support for the Zelensky government. But Joe Biden appears to be sticking to his incremental approach towards sanctions against Russia. One example, the SWIFT network. Critics were saying, in effect, what are you waiting for in severing Russia's access to that system for settling international transactions? What the administration was waiting for was more buy-in from Europe. And they got it, even from heavily exposed countries like Germany and Italy. And then the U.S. moved forward. The U.S., along with its allies, is starting to freeze Russian access to foreign currency reserves held outside the country. Depending on the speed of the freeze, barring Russian access to as much as $640 billion held outside the country in New York, in London, in Frankfurt, could begin a downward spiral for Russian financial institutions. Runs on banks, a cratering of the ruble, said one U.S. administration official. By this action, we're disarming Fortress Russia. I'm Ray Suarez for Euronews in Washington.
The Russian ruble plummeted to a record low against the dollar on Monday, amid an accelerating Western-led campaign to punish and isolate Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. As Moscow markets opened, the ruble was worth around 105 per dollar. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, it was worth around 83 per dollar. Investors flocked to safe haven currencies, including the US dollar and yen, after Russian President Vladimir Putin put nuclear-armed forces on high alert on Sunday. The US and European Union announced unprecedented sanctions over the weekend. Those measures have targeted the Russian central bank, which has intervened to prop up the value of the ruble following Putin's order to invade Ukraine. Significantly, on Sunday, they also marked the first time Russian banks have been excluded from the SWIFT international payment system. Major Russian banks such as Sberbank and VTB Bank have assured their customers that they will be able to access the ruble deposits and make exchanges for foreign currencies like dollars and euros.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has ushered in a, quote, new era in world history, noting that the events of the past week have raised serious questions over the ability of Western allies to deter, quote, warmongers like Vladimir Putin.
We must support Ukraine in this desperate situation, and we have done so to a large extent in recent weeks, months and years. But with the invasion of Ukraine, we have entered a new era. In Kyiv and Kharkiv and also in Mariupol, people are not only defending their homeland, they're fighting for freedom and their democracy, for values that we share with them.
Scholz was speaking at a special sitting of the Bundestag. He announced a one-off, quote, special fund of 100 billion euros to bolster Germany's defences. He went on to say that the country will invest more than 2% of its gross national product in annual military spending.
The third major challenge is to prevent Putin's war from spreading to other countries in Europe. This means, without ifs and buts, we stand by our duty of support in NATO. President Putin should not underestimate our determination to defend every square metre of alliance territory together with our allies.
Scholz also thanked everyone who protested against Putin's war and those who stand for a free and peaceful Europe, which he vowed to defend.
Sunday saw what can only be described as an immensely historic day in Germany for the country's security, defence and foreign policy. In a special address to Parliament, Chancellor Olaf Scholz told the Bundestag, "We are in a new era." So what are some of the changes? Well, in light of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, Scholz said the German government would now allocate 100 billion extra euros for the German armed forces in this year's budget. From now on, more than 2% of Germany's GDP will also be invested in the country's defence. And you might remember that Germany has been repeatedly criticised in recent years for devoting far less than that 2% mark on defence spending, which is called for by NATO agreements. A day earlier, on Saturday too, the German government also agreed to provide 1,000 anti-tank weapons and 500 surface-to-air missiles from German military stocks to Ukraine as soon as possible. That too, a tremendous shift away from Germany's long-standing principle of not sending or selling weapons directly to conflict zones, something that was close to unthinkable just a week ago. So while many critics are now asking whether it was really necessary for Germany to take so long to move away from its rigid defence and security policy, even the harshest of critics are describing this weekend just gone as a historic turning point, not only for Germany, but also for European security and defence. Kate Brady, Euronews, Berlin.